Money Buddy Podcast, brought to you by Money and Me, an investor education and awareness initiative by PGIM India Mutual Fund.
All right, let's waste no time and jump right in. Welcome back to Money Buddy, everybody, an investor awareness initiative brought to you by PGIM India Mutual Fund. I'm Ahalya, keeping you company just until Ajit Menon, CEO of PGIM India Mutual Fund, joins us for another very exciting episode. You know, when we all start our investment journeys, I think we do it with singular focus, right? That is, let's make as much money as we can, as quickly as we can. And as we progress in that investor journey, we realize that there are a lot of factors that influence how much money we make and how quickly we make it, right? But the one thing that we don't always focus on is this little thing called the savings rate. We're always trying to put as much money as we can into our investments, looking at building that corpus by number, right? But that's not the only thing that impacts how quickly we make our money. The savings rate, which is what Ajit is going to be talking to us about, is a very, very crucial factor when it comes to achieving your financial goals. So today we're going to dissect that, or Ajit's going to dissect that. We're going to sit back and listen and soak up all of these insights into the world of money making. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of Money Buddy, where we are going to talk about why you should pay more attention to your savings rate rather than also the returns of your, or only the returns on your portfolio, right? Most of us just look at that and figure out and want to know, what's the return am I getting on my portfolio? But there is a magic in paying attention to your savings rate as well. And that's what I'm going to be talking with you about today. And, I was thinking about this topic and it came up in a conversation with my daughter. If you've listened to my last podcast, I was telling you that my daughter's just graduated and, now she's obviously looking for a job. She wants to work for a couple of years before she does a master's and then carries on with her career. And we were having this money conversation, which I occasionally do with my kids. And I tell them that, what do you think is the money that you would be happy with retiring on? And, monthly, what would you like? And both my kids were like, well, if you have $1 lakh of rupees to spend, that would be great. And I was thinking, wow, I was thinking that, this is exactly like how I used to think when I was young and I just got into a career. I still remember I graduated in 1994 and my first job was with a blue chip company. It was Crompton Greaves and I think my starting monthly salary was something like 5,000. And I remember thinking at that time and discussing with friends, guys, if I get to 15,000 or 20,000, I'm quitting. That's it. That's like a great salary and that will be it. And I would have reached the pinnacle of my career and things like that. So you all know sometimes how naive we are when we think about what money we want. And it was exactly that with my kids when they were thinking that, well, if they had $1 lakh of rupees, that would be fine. Well, that would be fine today. But when they think about retiring 20 or 25 years later, that might be something which might not be enough and they will need more. And that I'm sure most of you know. So why talk about all of this? When we're thinking about the savings rate and how does, paying attention to the savings rate sort of help in this whole conversation. Let me take a step back. Recently I was reading an article where I found this sort of reference to a report that was done by the State Bank of India. And they had researched about all the tax filings that was done in India for the year 21-22, which was assessed probably last year. And well, there were about, I think, more than 7.78 crore people who filed their taxes. That's like 77 million people who filed their taxes in India. That number is keeping on rising. And the sort of weighted mean income that was filed was about 13 lakh in 21-22. So, done last year, filed last year. So think about that for a second. 13 lakhs is the sort of weighted mean income. Weighted mean meaning that they've not made a simple average. They've just looked at the probability of, all of the data and assigned weights to it. So that's a better way of looking at what could be the sort of average salary that you can expect or income that you can expect across the country for everybody who's filed taxes. And and that number is 13 lakhs. That's pretty good. In fact, the same research seemed to suggest that as it progresses, by 2047, the weighted mean income for tax filers in India would be 49.7 lakh. Wow, that's a prosperous country right there. And I think we are all excited about the journey that India is taking in so far and in the years ahead. So coming back to our topic on paying attention to your savings rate, I was working with my team little recently, and I was working on an aspect of saying, well, a lot of people are worried about what corpus they can put aside for their retirement, which is a big financial goal. As you know, I've spoken about this in the past, that retirement is the only financial goal for which you don't get a conventional loan. There are things like reverse mortgage, which is not very mature in India. But, most people just think emotionally about, okay, I need to put money aside for my kids' education, for their marriage, for a house, for a car. Of course, they're great goals. But if you fall short on any of those goals, you do get an education loan or a home loan or a car loan or so on and so forth. But you don't get a retirement loan. So it's a very important goal for all of us to keep in mind and to prioritize. So I was working with my team and saying, hey, do you think that if somebody had a 2 crore corpus, that would be fine for them, to last for a very long time? Of course, my team said, okay, what do you mean? How much would they want to withdraw every month? And I said, 1 lakh. That's what my daughter told me, 1 lakh, and she would be happy. So I said, 1 lakh, and okay. And then, but every year inflation is going to hit that withdrawal as well. So what should be inflation? So I said, well, maybe every year it goes up 6%. All of these expenses go up 6%. And they computed it based on some work that we've been doing about an asset allocation that you can do for retirement. And they came back and said, you know what? That 2 crore corpus will last lifelong for a person who wants to withdraw 1 lakh every month. And at a 6% inflation, it'll last forever. And I was stunned. I said, wow, that's how easily, you can plan your investments for your retirement. And it's possible to make that amount last a lifetime. And of course, I looked at the rates of return that people use for projections, and you can't use any rate of return. You've got to use rates of return which have been prescribed by the authorities here in mutual funds. AMFI would give you a code of conduct or to say that, hey, you can't use any rate. Here's what you can use for different categories of products, and we used those rates, and it looked great. Now, when you think about that, I want you to think about why this attention to savings rate. Because getting to that 2 crore corpus is the first hurdle, right? People would say, it's all right if you had that corpus and you invested it well and made it last a lifetime. But how the hell do I get to the corpus in the first place? And I know that all of you would have gone and done calculators online and stuff to do what SIPs should you do or what monies you should put aside by. But I do want you to think about your savings rate, because let me give you this example, right? If, for instance, you had your salary was just 1 lakh of rupees a month, right? I just told you that in India, the weighted mean tax filed was 13 lakhs a year. So I'm just using the same thing, saying approximately, let's say that you had a salary of 1 lakh a month. And you've got to also assume that every year your salary is, you're getting a 7% increment on average every year. So that's built into these assumptions as well. But now you've got to imagine that you have a 10% savings rate. You're saving 10,000 rupees every month. So you have a 10% savings rate and you're putting that in an investment which is getting you 6% as a return. How much money do you think you will have after 10 years or after 20 years? Well, after 10 years, that savings is going to amount to about 1,88,000 rupees. Or it's going to be about 7,02,000 rupees at the end of 20 years, right? So, well, you would say, well, I need to get better returns on my savings. So, well, okay, 10% saving, but now I'm going to get a 12% return per annum. So how much is that going to be after 10 years and after 20 years? Well, that's going to be 2,55,000 at the end of 10 years and 12,93,000 at the end of 20 years instead of that 7 lakh. Fantastic. Now you increase the rate of return, and so you've got a much bigger corpus at the end of 10 years or at the end of 20 years. But now comes the magic. Imagine that your returns was not 12%, but it was the same old 6%. But now think about this. If your savings rate, instead of being 10%, if your savings rate was 20%, then the corpus you would have had at the end of 10 years would have been 3,73,000, and at the end of 20 years, 14,04,000. Unbelievable, isn't it? But that's the magic of the savings rate. And it's simple common sense. You're putting more money to work earlier rather than later. That's all. That's the magic of compounding that happens, therefore, over a longer period of time. So when you think about this example, please remember that increasing your savings rate is as important an objective as looking at good returns on a good diversified portfolio. Okay, so why am I talking about all of this and asking you to pay more attention to your savings rate as equal to paying attention to the returns you get on your portfolio? Probably more important. Well, let me just illustrate that with an example. Assuming that you just had a lakh of rupees and you were saving 10% of that, right? Just a lakh of rupees, and assuming that also grew every year by 7%. So let's also take that into consideration. But for a moment, let's assume a simple example. 1 lakh rupee salary, you save 10% of it, you put it into an investment which gave you a 6% return. Could be any simple product that you saved in for which you got 6% return. Well, after 10 years, you'll have 1,86,000 rupees, and after 20 years, you will have about 7 lakh rupees. That's what a 10% savings from a lakh is going to get you invested at 6% for 10 years and for 20 years. 1,86,000 and 7 lakh at 20. Now, of course, you're not going to be happy with 6% return. So, well, you say that, no, I'm going to now put that into a 12% return, double the return. So now you're saving the same 10% from your 1 lakh salary and you're investing it at 12% return. What is the amount that you're going to get at the end of 10 years and at the end of 20 years? Same example, same salary, same 7% increment every year that you have to assume. And well, the result is that now you will have 2,55,000 rupees at the end of 10 years and 12,90,000 rupees at the end of 20 years. Clearly, getting more returns is helpful, is useful, and everybody wants it. But now comes the magic. Imagine that you didn't increase your rate of return from 6% to 12% and you kept it exactly at the same 6%. All you did was, instead of saving 10% from your salary, you're now saving 20% of your salary. Do you know what that is going to get you? So a 20% savings rate with a 6% return at the end of 10 years is going to be 3,70,000. And at the end of 20 years, 14,04,000. Much, much higher than the 12% return example or the 6% return example, right? You still got the same 6%, but instead of saving your savings rate being 10%, you're now saving 20. And it's common sense. You're putting more money to work earlier and allowing the magic of compounding to work on those early savings as well. So now you know why paying attention to your savings rate is as important, if not more important, than just the rate of returns that you're getting on your portfolio.
A big thank you is, of course, due to Ajit at the end of every Money Buddy episode. But this one truly was very, very eye-opening. I think, like he said, like we started the episode with, the savings rate concept or phenomenon is not one that we often pay close attention to, right? Gen Z does have this phrase, right? The hero we never knew we wanted, but the one we need. And I think the savings rate phenomenon fits that description pretty perfectly. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Money Buddy, everybody. Ahalya here, signing off for now. We will be bringing you episodes, some exciting stuff coming your way that I'm sure will help you in your investor journey. So stay tuned for all of that and more. For now, that's a wrap. Stay safe, stay happy, and happy investing.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Money Buddy Podcast, brought to you by Money and Me, an investor education and awareness initiative by PGIM India Mutual Fund.